Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, who's the co-host of this program. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Well, good. We're back to the subject we visit quite frequently because it's pretty important. That, of course, is foreign policy, what's going on in the Middle East. And right now, in the last couple of days, there's been an admission by the governments and the pseudo-governments and everybody's involved over there that things are deteriorating quickly. Not just in Iraq, but in Syria too. There was a major change in Syria, although there was slightly quiet there for a little while. But now yesterday, Palmyra fell to ISIS, and this is considered rather significant.
Yes, it is. The news media reports, of course, on the fact that it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there's some very important antiquities there. Very unique and important antiquities. But from our perspective, of course, that's a concern. But it marks the first time that ISIS has directly taken a large population center from the Syrian government's army. So directly taken it. So that's significant. It also means with the taking of Palmyra that ISIS controls now 50% of Syrian territory. Wow. So after all these months of bombing, ISIS has only strengthened in the region.
But, you know, maybe I found the answer today because there was a military expert. I think he was still, before he retired, he was like lieutenant colonel, but he is the expert. And he said there's one reason why this is happening and why things are failing, and that is the governments are too weak. You know, we don't have a strong government in Syria, and for that reason, there's too much chaos, and nobody will defend and feed the people and have medical programs. So they need a stronger government. What is he missing there? Why could he be half right? Like, there is a weak government. Why is there a weak government?
Isn't it amazing how they reinvent the world every day? It's as if the last 4 years of the U.S. supporting groups, including al-Qaeda groups and ISIS groups, to weaken and overthrow the Syrian government never existed. Now all of a sudden they're upset because their program to undermine the Syrian government was successful. If you remember, they also were supporting the overthrow of Maliki in favor of this new guy, and so there's weakness there. So you create the weakness and then you say the problem is the weakness.
Well, you know, the leadership, whoever they are in Iraq right now, says we don't need troops. Things are okay. We don't need any foreign troops, but we need weapons. And I got to thinking, what do they do with our weapons? You wonder who's in the weapons business over there. You know, since Ramadi fell, they're strategizing on how do they take it back again. And they pretend they're very serious. They may be serious. If they are, they're not very good military people. So the strategy, according to this military guy, is that what we need to do is recognize we've lost this, but we gotta hold Baghdad. Hold Baghdad and reorganize and start training the troops. They've been doing it for 12 years, training the troops, and now they're going to do this. And but they need some weapons. Now, the other day when we talked about Ramadi, we figured, well, you know, they're going to get some weapons out of this. Guess what? They got a bunch of tanks, American tanks. So one of the solutions now that we've agreed to, according to what I read in the media, is that we're sending 1,000 anti-tank missiles to our allies over there, whoever they are, to bomb and destroy American tanks. We have American anti-missiles destroying American tanks.
I bet they're popping the champagne corks at Raytheon right now, you know.
This is just absolutely bewildering. But they always asking for more weapons, and you know they want the troops. The big question, of course, we wanted to address a little bit here is whether it's Syria or Iraq or both together, because I don't think we should think of them as separate, because you know, the enemy that is being built and the target, of course, is ISIS, and the big troop, and also this was discussed on regular media, is, you know, it looks like we're going to need to send the troops. And when somebody was pressing one of the military experts, they said, well, how many do you need? Well, that all depends, hemmed and hawed, but we'd only do one city at a time. We'd need about 3,000 here, and then we take that city and we move over. They wouldn't say, you know, we need 500,000 troops, you know, or whatever is necessary. But you know, that is foolhardy. Why can't we, you and I, figure it out What motivates these people? Is it pure stupidity? Whose side are they on? It seems like we're on the side of ISIS. Everything we do seems to help them. Look at what's happened since 2003. After about me fighting for 5 years not to do it, ISIS and Al-Qaeda is stronger than ever, and it doesn't look like the Iranians are suffering much.
No, not at all. I mean, it does make you wonder, are the military planners that incompetent? Do they not know what's happening? Or, like you've said all along, is it possible that using airstrikes cannot defeat a group like ISIS, and in fact it just emboldens them and makes them stronger? Or, as you point out, and it's hard to imagine this, that the U.S. wants ISIS to win. That's hard to understand and hard to accept.
Well, it almost looks like if they set out to have a goal, their goal was chaos. And you know, there are some people who like revolutions, that chaos serves their interest. But right now, who's really responsible? Who are the people behind the scenes? And is that their purpose? But if that is the goal, it's a very, very successful 12 years, 13 years, and it's going to go on for a long time. And we've been warned. We've been forewarned by the current president and the previous president. This is a long war. This is the long war. It's going to be there a long time, and prepare for it. And the only thing is, the American people have put a little pressure on our government. Don't send any more kids home in body bags.
Yeah.
Of course, they're sending a lot of kids home that their lives are destroyed, and they're killing themselves in an epidemic fashion. So.
Sure. Well, as you've known very well throughout your career, and we talked about it just the other day, in fact, that this whole new bombing started with a small group of Yazidis who we absolutely had to sacrifice. We had to save these people from ISIS, and it's bloomed into this huge war. And this is it's always the case where you go into Vietnam was another example, and once you're in, as you often pointed out, for the troops' sake, you can't pull out then because...
Yeah, and even I think you just mentioned about Palmyra, there wasn't a tremendous... The Americans didn't assist, and there weren't a tremendous amount of people on the side. I still believe that the people, the local people, generally support ISIS, even though they wouldn't say so, because I think they are the defenders of the homeland. And I think when you hear a leader say, we don't need troops, we don't need any foreigners in here, because they don't like foreigners in there, and yet we have it so often that people get sucked in this country, you know, whether it's the beheadings or the ISIS and holy sites being destroyed, and they're beating the war drums, and I fear that soon we already have troops over there and special forces, but I think it's going to get much bigger because they're not going to walk away from this.
You know, it's interesting, in Ramadi, which we talked about in the last program, it was taken, the U.S. had about a 24-hour notice that it was about to go. There were very few airstrikes. Some people were curious about that. One of the sites that I like to read, the Moon of Alabama blog, is always very interesting. They point out, and I noticed this elsewhere in the media, right after ISIS took Ramadi, they held a massive military parade. I saw pictures of it. Hundreds of vehicles, a lot of them U.S. Humvees, were parading down the street. The skies were perfectly clear. And this looked to me, I'm not an expert, but it looks like a target to me. Nothing happened. It's just incredible.
You know, we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I wanted to spend a couple minutes on this whole idea of authority to go to war, because they talked at one time about having a declaration of war against ISIS, which is rather bizarre because ISIS is pretty hard to declare. It's like declaring war against terrorism, and those are tactics. But it's not even coming up. I mean, the Congress is reneging on that. They're not assuming responsibility. They literally don't even want an amendment to discuss, you know, what the congressional role is. They wouldn't let some of our friends bring up an amendment where there could be a debate, even though the opposition would win it. But they don't even want to hear a debate on it.
They passed the funding, but they don't want to debate whether we should be in there militarily.
That's right. They've never been denied the funding. But you know, the War Power Resolution, which was supposed to restrain militarism, you know, after Vietnam War, that was a bad policy. It never really worked. And Congress, and I'm sure you recall, in 2003, it was basically the Democrats that didn't want to push it because they sort of thought, well, and their strategy was probably politically correct in that they allowed Bush to go ahead and do it, and still it's not very popular to say, oh, that was a great war. But the wars of past, especially in Iraq, They're not great wars, and yet the very same people are saying we can't wait to itch into just go and expand the war.
That's right. You know, in the next big blow up, there'll be another outrage in a few weeks or a few days or who knows what, and what'll happen? It'll be an authorization.
Yeah, and that'll calm down the opposition, but quite frankly, the large majority are apathetic. You know, I figure that they didn't have somebody die in their family, and this is necessary, and people who aren't for war are weaklings, and they're not patriotic, and they're not strong America. This is our responsibility. This is, we are the policemen of the world, and we spread goodness around the world. We've heard that. I think that's false propaganda for sure. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and come back soon.